What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Lions video. Now, a couple months ago, late into November, we made a video kind of like this, talking about the Detroit Lions' future, talking about their roster, their youth, their draft capital, what to maybe expect for the future, and of course, how bright the future may be for our Lions franchise. However, since November, in the time span between November and now, a lot has obviously changed for this Lions organization. New coaches, new GM, new staffs, new quarterback, new players. Really, everything about this organization has changed except for the colors, the logo, and the actual name. So in today's video, I wanted to revisit this subject. I wanted to revisit this idea, talking about the future of this franchise, right? Talking about the youth on this team, going through the roster, talking about the young players, the cornerstone pieces, the players that are going to be here for a while, and the players that we can build around, but also talk about the coaching staff, also talk about the draft capital that we have coming up, the potential we have for 2022 or 2023, and really get a good idea, a good grasp on what we can expect to see from this Lions team, not only next year, but a year or two down the road as well, and what to really expect for the future of this franchise. Now, before we get into the video, before we get into talking about this Lions future, if you're new to the channel and you are enjoying the content, please consider liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. It takes just 2 seconds out of you to do so. It's quick, it's free, and it's easy. As I said, it takes just those 2 seconds to make my day and help the channel out more than you could possibly know. So if you could do that, I'd be greatly appreciative for it. But with all that being said, without any further ado, let's get right into talking about the Detroit Lions' future of the franchise.
So we get Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
Now, starting off with the current state of the Detroit Lions, right? Starting off with their actual roster that they have set in place right now, looking to take into the 2021 season. Now, the Lions, very similarly to the last time we made this video, are still a very, very young team, and in fact, are a younger team now than they were a year ago. Starting at the quarterback position, of course, you have Jared Goff, who at worst in the NFL is a top 20 quarterback. On his best days is probably closer to that 15 to 12 range. Jared Goff is only 26 years old according to the Detroit Lions roster. Jared Goff is only 26 years of age, meaning that if he does keep his play very high, Jared Goff realistically could play in the NFL for another decade, whether that be as a starter or just a quality backup. Jared Goff can be an NFL quarterback for 7, 8 to 10 years even, and still play at a high level if his play actually does continue to be where it's at as of the past couple of years. Right, Jared Goff is very young, so whether the Detroit Lions found their new franchise quarterback in Jared Goff through that trade, or whether Jared Goff is just a placeholder, worst case scenario, the Lions have a top 20 quarterback for 7, 8, 9 years, and then they can move on from him. Worst case, the Lions have Jared Goff for 2, 3, 4 years. They play out the rest of his contract till Jared Goff is 30-something, and then you move on to the young rookie quarterback. Maybe you wait for DJ Uiagalelei out of Clemson. Maybe you wait for CJ Stroud out of Ohio State, or whatever young quarterback is in college football right now. Maybe you want to wait for that guy. Maybe you don't like the quarterback class this year and you want to stick with Jared for 2 years. Maybe you like Spencer Rattler. Maybe the Lions like Sam Howell. Maybe they go with him. It doesn't really matter, because I think Jared Goff is youthful enough and talented enough to give the Lions a lot of flexibility. He's not going to make it so the Detroit Lions are forced to take a quarterback with their first round pick. It's not at the point where he's old enough where really you need to get that next player behind him. Jared Goff is young enough and talented enough to be the next franchise quarterback, and if not, he's young enough and talented enough to give the Lions the flexibility to wait for their guy and wait for the right quarterback. Now, not only is Jared Goff a youthful quarterback, but the backups are also relatively young. Tim Boyle is only 26 years of age as well, and then David Blau is only going into his 3rd season at 25 years old. The quarterback position in general is relatively young. It is really young for the Detroit Lions, which is good and bad. Of course, the youthfulness means that they can be here for a while, but the youthfulness also means that we might not have the most experience in this room. However, I think Jared Goff is experienced enough to right the ship, and he's very very much experienced enough to be the leader of this football team. Moving on to the running back position, the running backs are also very, very young. Of course, starting with the young stud in DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is only 22 years of age, coming off a season as a rookie where he averaged 4.6 yards per carry and 5.5 yards per touch. DeAndre Swift is a young stud running back, a guy that'll be here for 3 more seasons at the minimum and likely longer than that based off what Brad Holmes has done already with our star players. You know, DeAndre Swift is a cornerstone piece. He's a guy that's going to be here for a long time. It's going to be the engine of the offense next season, or likely going to be the engine of this offense next season. He is a phenomenal player at just 22 years old. Jamal Williams is our oldest running back on the roster at just 26. We know how good he is. We know how good he is in the red zone and how difficult he is to tackle, especially late into games and late into the season. You know, you have a lot of other younger guys. You know, you have 2 rookies on the roster, including Jermar Jefferson, the 7th round pick, who's only 21. And you have, I can't remember his first name, but it's Mills, the running back out of Nebraska. He's also a UDFA rookie. He's just 24 years old. You have other guys like Chris Warren, who's 22. The Lions just signed out of free agency. And then if you want to go to the fullback position, Jason Kabinda is only 25. So the oldest guy in our running back room, the oldest guy in our backfield is 26 years of age. That is really young. And I know running back primes are probably lesser than anybody else, and running backs especially kind of wear out much faster than almost every other position. But still, the Lions have a very young running back core. They have a very young backfield with that one veteran, one older guy that kind of knows what he's doing and can kind of be that veteran presence in the locker room. Now, moving on to the offensive line, this is where it really gets exciting for the Detroit Lions, because not only can offensive linemen play longer than a lot of other positions, right? Offensive linemen are guys that you see play into their 30s, sometimes into their 40s. Their position is a lot based off technique, so even if some of their athleticism and some of their strength leaves them, a lot of the times they can make up for that with better technique and better just fundamentals. That is not really a big concern for the Detroit Lions right now. You know, you look at this offensive line, Taylor Decker playing at a top level, playing like an all-pro tackle, is only 27. He is one of the oldest players on our offensive line, the second oldest. Jonah Jackson looked like one of the best young guards in the NFL last year. He's just 24. Frank Ragnow is only 25. He is the best center in the NFL. Big V is really your only kind of semi-question mark. He's 28. He's a little bit older, but he's not horrible. He's not super old either. And then you have Penei Sewell, the second youngest player from this past draft, who's only 20 years old and won't be 21 until the next league year begins. All of those players are locked up until a minimum, until the earliest of 2023. So that is a young, solidified offensive line right there. But you want to go a little bit deeper, go into their depth. Tyrell Crosby is only 25. Drake Jackson is only 23. Logan Stenberg is only 24. The other guard that they got in UDFA out of Notre Dame was only 23. They have a super young offensive line and a super talented offensive line, mind you. Going to their tight end position, they have 6 tight ends that are all younger than 24. TJ Hockenson is 23. Elise Mack has been making a lot of plays in training camp. He's only 24. You know, you have Brock Wright, who's only 22. He's arguably the best blocking tight end in the entirety of this draft class. You have Austin Bryant, you have Hunter Bryant, who's arguably the most athletically gifted and highest potential tight end on this roster, especially from a receiving standpoint. He's only 22 years old. All of these tight ends are super young and super talented, having a ton of potential in the NFL. Hawkinson's already showed what he can do. Hawkinson's already had his breakout Pro Bowl season. He's only going to get better as he grows older. You know, you have Elise Mack, 24 years old, already making plays. Hunter Bryant, we saw make a couple big plays versus Tennessee when he was actually healthy a season ago. And then again, Brock Wright is a guy that is kind of underrated, but a guy that can definitely make the roster as a big-time blocking tight end, and maybe getting more roles than, or maybe getting a bigger role than many would believe, especially in like goal line situations or something like that, or short yardage situations. You look at the wide receiver core. The wide receiver core is looked at for the Detroit Lions being not as talented or not as star-studded as many of the other NFL teams. But one thing the Lions do have in their receiver room is youth. The Lions do not have a single wide receiver on their roster over the age of 30. Tyrell Williams is their veteran in that locker room. He's only 29 years old. Quintez Cephas, the second-year player, is only 23. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, the rookie, who's 21. Victor Bolden's only 26. And Tommy Kennedy is only 24. The Lions have 4 rookie wide receivers on their roster right now in training camp. Of course, Amon-Ra being one of them, as I said, only 21 years old. Jonathan Adams Jr., who's 22, Sage Surratt, who's 23, and Javon McKinley, who's only 23. That doesn't even mention Khalif Raymond, who's not very old. That doesn't even mention Damian Ratley, who's not very old. And there is no wide receiver over the age of 30. They're all in their early to mid-20s, with the exception of really Tyrell Williams, and I believe Brashad Perryman is 27. Neither of those guys are super old for the wide receiver position, and it's not like either of those two guys, Brashad Perryman or Tyrell Williams, are really the long-term answer at wide receiver that Detroit has been looking for. You move on to the defensive side of the ball, right? We saw how young the offense is, how young and talented, and how much potential the offense has with their youth and with their athletic upside. But going on to the defense, especially the defensive line, there's a lot of really good youth on this defense for the Lions. Austin Bryant, really good player when he's healthy. He's only 24. Trey Flowers, our veteran, is only 27 years old. Julian Okwara is only 23. Romeo Okwara, our other veteran, is only 26 years old. Deshaun Hain is 25. John Pennicini is 24. Jayshawn Cornell is 24. Our new rookies, Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike, are 21 and 23 respectively. Our defensive line outside of Michael Brockers is really, really young, with only 2 players being over the age of 25, and with a lot of them having a ton of athletic upside, and a lot of them having a ton of potential in general. You go to the linebacking core, Jamie Collins is really your big-time veteran there. He's 31. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's kind of an older player for sure. However, you look at the rest of the linebacking core, Alex Anzalone is 26. Derek Barnes is 22. Tavante Beckett is 23. Sean Deion Hamilton's 25. Jalen Reeves-Maybin is 26. Jelani Tavai is only 24 years old. You go into the secondary, Quentin Dunbar, our leader, our veteran in that locker room, our veteran in the secondary room, our oldest player in the secondary, in fact, is only 28 years old. Corn Elder, another guy that is a little bit more of a veteran, only 26. Mike Ford is 25. Jeff Okuda's 22. Amani's 25. Walker's only 26. Will Harris is 25. Jalen Elliott is 22. Bobby Price is 23. Looking at all the young rookies on this Lions team, Adrian Amos is 23. Fede Melifonwu is just 22 years old. AJ Parker's 23. Jerry Jacobs is only 23. And the Lions only have 6 players on this roster that are over the age of 30. Those being Don Muhlbach, who's 39, who is an older player, but he's a long snapper, and we have his backup on the roster right now just in case. Darren Fells, who's going to be a backup role player tight end, likely just being a red zone threat. He's a guy that is not a long-term answer, not a long-term free agency signing. You have Nick Williams, the depth defensive tackle, who may not even end up making the final 53 based on my projections. You have Randy Bullock, the kicker, who's 31, who, again, kind of like offensive linemen, kickers seem to play a little bit longer than a lot of other positions. So even though he's 31, that's not really that old for a kicker. It's older on the older side of kickers for sure, but that's not necessarily like verge of retirement. And then the only other guy that's above 30, or even not even above 30, Michael Brockers, is just 30 years old. Those are the 6 players on the roster that are older than 30. Everybody else is still in their 20s, and a majority of them are in their early to mid-20s. So this team, as of right now, is incredibly young. They don't have a ton of experience. They don't exactly now have all the experience they may need it for their NFL success, but they do have youth. They do have athleticism. They do have potential, and they all have roles, and they all have different spots, and they all have different roles that they are trying to develop into. And looking at this Lions team, even if they're not good this year, they are young enough and they are going to develop enough over the next couple years that by 2022, by 2023, especially with this coaching staff, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with, especially if they can all grow and build together. You talk about developing this roster, you talk about these players growing together and kind of developing into certain roles and kind of developing, fine-tuning their athletic potential and their overall potential. And you look at that and you say, okay, but a lot of that's going to come down to the coaching staff, right? They may have potential, they may have talent, but how are these coaches going to mold that young talent? What kind of guys do we have in here that are going to be able to really help these players see their full potential? Well, the coaching staff is in my opinion, one of the best in the NFL, right? You have Anthony Lynn, who's a really good offensive coordinator, isn't necessarily so good at some other things, but that's not necessarily his job anymore. As a head coach, definitely had some struggles, but really as an offensive coordinator, he plays more to his strengths than anything else. Aaron Glenn, one of the top secondary coaches in the NFL, is now a defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. You have guys like Deuce Staley, who's one of the top running back coaches. You have Todd Wash, one of the better defensive line coaches. Mark DeLone, one of the better linebacker coaches. Aubrey Pleasant, one of the better defensive back coaches in the NFL. One of the better, you have Frank Harley, I believe is how you say his name, our offensive line coach, is one of the best in the NFL. All of these guys are proven and that they can develop young talent over and over and over again because they've done it in the NFL for many, many years. So I have no doubt that these coaches are going to be able to develop this young talent. I have no doubt that these coaches are going to be able to turn this young, talented, and high potential unit of Detroit Lions into a true force to be reckoned with in a year or two down the line. Now, not to mention that, but in the 2022 offseason, so the next offseason coming up, the Lions are projected to have just around $27 million of cap. However, they also have the flexibility next year to cut Trey Flowers and free up over $12 million of cap space there. Big V Phillips, if they can cut Big V for minimal dead cap, freeing up over $5 million, and Jamie Collins can free up over $11 million without significant dead cap as well. The Lions are about to come into a ton of capital when it comes to money. They're about to come into a ton of cap space here in the Motor City in the next year or so. Not to mention the Lions are also going into the 2022 draft with a minimum of 9 draft picks, including 2 firsts and 2 thirds. One of those thirds being a conditional pick for Kenny Golladay, and they may even get more than that. They could get a complimentary pick or a compensatory pick for Marvin Jones or Jamal Agnew or Jared Davis, or there's a couple other guys that are here and there that they could get compensatory picks for, but they're gonna have at minimum 9 draft picks. 5 of them in the first 3 rounds, 5 of them on the first 2 days of the draft at a minimum. The Lions are young, they're talented, they have a really good coaching staff. They're about to come into a ton of capital, and there is no reason the Lions cannot be contenders by 2023. And if all goes according to plan, if everything works out better than expected, and Dan Campbell gets these players working harder and faster than even I or a lot of the optimistic Lions fans are expecting, the Lions could be contenders by 2022. I fully expect this Lions team to be back in the playoffs or back in playoff contention by 2022. They missed the playoffs by a game or two in the year 2022, in the 2022 season. If they missed the playoffs by a game or so, then I'm not going to be upset. But come 2023, this team is going to be really good. They're going to be grown, they're going to be developed, they're going to be at the right age, they're all going to be having grown together and built this team up together. And with 5 more draft picks in the first 2 days next year, with all the draft capital and all the cap space that they're going to have on the books, they are going to be able to get some true big-time difference maker playmakers in this building, and it is only going to help the progression of this Lions team grow faster and faster and faster until eventually they are back to where they want to be, which is playoff contention and eventually Super Bowl contention. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching the video. Let me know what you guys think about this Lions team down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about their future. How bright do you think their future can be? How good do you think they will be in a couple of years? And how good do you think they can be this year? Let me know that down in the comments below. I'd be very interested to hear what you guys think. But with all that being said, that's all for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, of course, go Lions!